morning, everyone. If you could please be seated, we'll start our meeting. Welcome to the Silicon Valley Clean Energy Board meeting for February. I will call the meeting to order now. It's about 7:03. And we have quite a few new members joining us this evening. So what I'd like to do is if we could just start from the end, and if you could introduce yourselves, and we'll make that our roll call, that'd be great. Could you press the button? Do you have the green button? It's the mute, push to mute button. Oh, is it different? Oh.
I'll just speak up. Yeah, okay, leave it up. Yeah, my name is Javed Delhai. I just got elected to the City of Montecito as council, my first term, and I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Bob Nunez from Milpitas.
Marika Sayok with Los Gatos.
Nancy Smith, City of Sunnyvale.
Rod Sinks, Cupertino.
Courtney Corrigan, Los Altos Hills.
I'm Margaret Abekoga. I'm with the City of Mountain View.
Howard Miller with the City of Saratoga.
Liz Gibbons, City of Campbell.
Great, and we have a few more members who may not be joining us this evening, but somehow they all ended up on
the left side of the room didn't understand we started at 7, apparently.
But welcome to all of our new members and our returning members. I look forward to a great year. Yes, look forward to working with all of you, so welcome. We will start, so roll call, everybody except the 4 here. We'll move on to public comment on matters not listed on the agenda. The public may provide comments on any item not on the agenda. Speakers are limited to 3 minutes each. And I believe, is this what, Bruce Carney, is this?
That's Bruce.
That's Bruce. Welcome, Bruce.
Thanks very much. Good to be back. Sorry I missed your January meeting. I wanted to say hello to the new members of the Board of Directors. Some of you may have seen me before. I'm the chair of Carbon Free Mountain View, which is a grassroots citizens group that visited all of the city councils in the county asking you to join SVCE, and here you all are, or most of you are. And so I wanted to let you know that as part of the advocacy community, we are connected with other advocates in other CCA regions, East Bay, Clean Power SF, Redwood Coast, and now there's a tremendous amount of CCA action in Southern California. Many of those communities are making 100% renewable energy their default. But SVCE is the only community choice organization that has chosen to make 100% greenhouse gas-free electricity available by default to all of your customers. And that's something that I'm very proud of because, as you might imagine from an organization called Carbon Free Mountain View, it's very important to us that that be one of the core values that the board fosters and maintains over time, despite all the trials and tribulations of the PGE bankruptcy and the ever-increasing PCIA fee. So you'll see me and other advocates from time to time, mostly applauding you, not saying bad things about you, because we think you've done a wonderful job and we just want you to keep up the good work.
Thank you, Bruce. Yes, there's a number of folks who've been with us from the very beginning and actually prodded us to get this going, and Bruce is one of them. So thank you for all of your dedication. Any other comments from the public? Any other speaker cards? If not, we'll move on to the consent calendar. These items will be taken with one motion unless, is there any member of the board wishing to pull any items?
I'd be happy to make the motion for 1A through 1G.
Actually, if I could go
1I.
Let me go to the public. Yep. Is there anyone from the public wishing to pull an item? Not? Okay.
Noting that you and I sit on the Air District Board, and we were happy to make the award in 1E, and excited that both the Air District and SVC are going to put in equally to see what we can do about getting some new water heating in this area.
Just to clarify, you made a motion to approve the entire consent calendar? Or
Yes,
did you skip H?
1E through 1I.
Great. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any other discussion? If not, I can just do one vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Oh, I'm sorry.
It's
Yes.
fine. Timing is right. Just have one thing to note for the record is with respect to with item 1E with the Air District, both board member Saints and also Chair Abkoga are members of the Air District board, and that should just be noted in the minutes of the meeting.
We don't need to recuse
You do not
them.
have to. Just need to make that disclosure.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, we'll move on now
did.
to the regular calendar. Item 2, we'll receive financial audit report from Vicente and Brinker LLP. Welcome.
If you could pull up the presentation, thank you.
I can speak loudly too. It's on, okay. Good evening, happy to be back again for our second year of performing the audit. My name is Brett Bradford. I'm from Presenti and Brinker, as was mentioned. Currently, we're working with about 5 CCAs, and we're happy to be working with Silicon Valley as well. I'm going to skip to this slide here because I don't want to bury the lead. The audit results. The audit is complete, and we've reported an unqualified opinion, which means that based on our audit, the financial statements are materially accurate. And the other good part is that we identified no significant deficiencies or material weaknesses in internal control during the performance of the audit. By the way, please ask me any questions here during my presentation. I have about 7 or 8 slides. Pop back to this slide, actually. This is just a quick revisit of the relative roles and responsibilities and what we do as the auditor compared to management and what their role is in the process. So management is responsible for preparing the financial statements and establishing a system of internal control. And Don and Maher, they together in their teams, they put together the financial statements. Then we perform the audit. We, of course, can't put the financial statements together because then we wouldn't be independent. And then for performing our audit, we use a risk-based approach, which is prescribed by the auditing standards. And what that means is we gain an understanding of the entity's operating characteristics, practices, and procedures, compare it to our knowledge of similar entities, like I said, the other CCAs that we work with. And then review the procedures and controls surrounding significant transaction cycles and business processes. And those are all part of our risk assessment procedures. Then we go on to obtain a description of controls and processes, more specifically to Silicon Valley. Then we evaluate the design of the controls within the context of the organization's activities. And then we evaluate the implementation of the controls, performing walkthroughs, and interviewing staff, observing the performance of the control, and inspecting documentation demonstrating that the control was performed. So some of our significant areas that we focused on during the audit, revenue recognition, making sure that accounts receivable and accrued revenue all exist and there's good cutoff on those items. We do that by testing a sample of customer billings. We relate total cash received during the year to revenue. Then we look at cash received subsequent to year end and relate that to accounts receivable as well. And we also evaluate the adequacy of the allowance for uncollectible accounts. All the CCAs that we're working with seem to be using about a similar methodology in that regard. I think as time goes on, that allowance, as more information is gained, that allowance methodology might be adjusted, but as of now, it seems to be adequate. And then lastly, we do certain cutoff procedures. We want to make sure that all the revenues that need to be recognized during the year are recognized, including revenues which relating to electricity, which has been sold but not yet billed for. And cash, we send confirmations directly to financial institutions. Accrued cost of electricity, this is an important item because we want to make sure that even though you may have not paid the bill yet to the energy suppliers, that you're picking up everything through the fiscal year end, which is 9/30. And we do that by looking at subsequent bills from electricity providers, performing analytical procedures, and looking at the cash going out there, and making sure that there's good cutoff. Cutoff's a theme because if you don't have good cutoff, then on the income statement side, it could possibly distort the results for the year. And we confirmed that loans were paid off during the year on notes payable. That was good. And then we make sure that the financial statement note disclosures are complete and without bias. And the financial statement note disclosures are all prescribed by the accounting standards for governmental entities. Fairly voluminous in that regard. So on these slides, some of these will seem a little repetitive or similar, but these are required communications, again, under the auditing standards that we're required to make to those charged with governance, which is the board. The significant accounting policies adopted by the organization throughout the periods audited appeared appropriate and consistently applied. We didn't identify any alternative treatments of accounting principles for material items in the financial statements. That means there were no options, really. There was no gray areas as to how they had to account for everything. It was pretty straightforward in that regard. We did not propose any adjustments to the financial statements. That's a good one. That's fairly unusual in my experience, but that means we didn't come across any errors that we needed to propose an adjustment for. And we did not identify any significant or unusual transactions or applications of accounting principles where a lack of authoritative guidance exists. This is a good one too. There were no disagreements with management concerning the scope of our audit, the application of accounting principles, or the basis for management's judgments on any significant matters. Similar to the last one, we did not encounter any difficulties in dealing with management during the performance of our audit. That's the end of my slideshow. We also met with the Finance Committee, Audit and Finance Committee, at least twice, I think it was, right? And dove into the weeds a fair amount. But I can answer any other questions at this time.
Thank you. Are there any questions from board members? Yes, please.
First, thank you for the audit. I am always happy to have an audit, and I'm always happy when it's clean. So 2 good points. One thing that we had been talking about was doing a comprehensive annual financial report-like document, but we need several years of history. Have we captured enough that next year we can be in a position, and this question may go right past you to the guy sitting right behind you. He tried to hide from me, but I knew where you were sitting.
Thank you, Director Miller. Yes, this would be our second year of financial statements. I think next year, when we spoke last year, we were saying let's shoot for 3 years. So next year we will have one.
I think that next year we can have our first go at it. There's going to be some details. I want to set expectations not too high.
Right. You usually kind of look for, at least a good 5 years of historical data, thing, but yeah. We'll see where we stand in 3.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments? Yes. Go ahead. Director Sinks and then Director Cargan.
Oh, fine. Who's on the audit committee? I know we have it in the packet, so.
And Nancy.
I've never been actually through an audit that was completely clean in my city or otherwise.
Oh, really?
Completely, with nothing? I mean, I think it's extraordinary, so.
So one thing that I've said to the folks on the committee, and Don and Garish as well, is when you're doing one thing exactly, and you also have involved some outside experts, not us in this case, but Maher as well, to support that process, it makes it fairly clean. Cities notoriously messier, and anything that nobody else is doing but somebody needs to do for that municipality, they get stuck with. And you don't have any federal money, because most cities do have those and have a single audit and all those type of things, which are very, very strict. None of those things going on, which make it easier. We talked about a couple minor things that we're going to look at going forward.
Well, thank God.
But no major or that minor deficiencies in internal control in that regard.
Well, I've never seen it in the private sector either. So I just want to express my appreciation to the members of the audit committee. Don, I think you deserve a shout out because this is your bailiwick, and I'm delighted.
Yeah, and
we're a new agency, and we're getting it right from the get-go, which is so important. So
just to
thank you, committee members.
To give you a little insight quickly into our approach and philosophy, we don't shy away from making those comments and presenting those findings when they happen.
Yeah.
So I wish other clients were this clean too. We're not allowed to say anything nice. That's what I told them.
He hasn't been nice until just now.
No, I mean, we obviously have a team that knows what they're doing in this sector, and that's, I think, what your audit reflects, and it gives great confidence to the public that we're doing their business transparently and well, so thank you.
Director Corrigan?
I would just add that I thought the subcommittee, Nancy and Jeannie, both had incredibly great questions, great insight, and between Brett and the SVCE team, I think we really felt great about the whole process and about where SVCE is. Just to kind of mirror and tag onto your comments, Rod, I'm quite proud of the work that SVCE is doing, and thank you, Brett, for your work. It was a pleasure to work with you.
Thank you.
Yes, Director Elahi.
Elahi. That's good. Thank you for the report. I'm a newbie on this, so I noticed the revenues had gone from 93 million in 2017 to 249 million in 2018 because apparently we started serving the city of Milpitas. When you did the audit, were you looking at the city of Milpitas documents also to see, what effect, did they have any effect on the audit itself? Is that something to consider?
The number of customers absolutely has an effect, and we increase our substantive testing essentially to accompany that, to accommodate that. So as you grow, it does make the audit larger, and I think it was whereas the prior year wasn't a full year as well.
Yeah, I guess it says July 2017 that they came in.
A full year. It wasn't a full year of operations in the prior year too. So I think that's part of it as well.
Okay.
Anyone else on the board? If not, are there any members of the public wishing to speak on this item? If not, I'll bring it back to the board if there are comments, and if not, I will entertain a motion.
I'm happy to make the motion if I'm allowed to as the chair of the audit committee. I'll make a motion to accept the financial audit report.
Second. Motion by Director Corrigan, and I heard both. Director Givens is a second?
No, it was.
Oh, was it Director Burns? I'm sorry.
So simultaneous.
Yes, I heard stereo sound. So any other comments? I just want to also express my thanks to the Brinker Company and staff. Thank you for all your work, and yeah, it's very exciting to see that we have a clean audit. So yes, definitely our staff, and especially Don, for all of your hard work. So with that, I will take a vote. All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much.
Brett, thank you for putting up with all of our questions from Don.
I actually enjoy it when there's questions instead of me just talking. So thank you.
Great. Thank you. All right, we will move on to item 3, our CEO report.
Chair Abhikoga, members of the board, Girish Balachandran. I have a few things to report on. First, I'd like to introduce a couple of staff members. We have Colleen Reagan, who's a Power Resources Planner, and Robert Sprague. I'm going to ask each of them to come on up and introduce themselves. Colleen joined us in January, and Colleen?
Good evening, everyone. It's lovely to meet you all. I'm very excited to be here. I've joined the team as a Power Resources Planner. I will be working with Director of Power Resources, Monica Padilla, to make sure that we have all the power we need to serve our customers here at SVCE. I came from 6 years at Bloomberg New Energy Finance, which is a market research firm looking at U.S. electricity markets. And as I said, excited to be here, and I'm looking forward to getting to know you all better. Thank you.
Thanks, Colleen. And Robert, as he comes up, I'll tell you that he worked with Amy, and that chart you saw on emissions coming down and those different kinds of curves, the brain's behind it.
Hi. Good evening, everyone. My name's Robert. I'll be working full-time during this quarter of school for Silicon Valley Clean Energy. As Girish said, I worked part-time last quarter and helped develop the decarb roadmap. This quarter, I'm working primarily with Amy and Monica on various data analyses, and I'm really enjoying it and looking forward to keeping up and contributing in any way I can. Yeah. Thank you.
I'd also like to mention a few awards that we're getting and recognize Don Bray and Andrea Paisano are both going to be receiving an award, the 2019 Spur Impact Award, and several other folks, some of whom you know, including Misty Mercich from Cupertino, Elaine Marshall, Steve Attinger, Kevin Armstrong, Demetra McBride, Tim Kirby, and of course, Melody Tovar. They're all being recognized for their efforts in creating and forming SVCE, so we're very proud of that and proud of that recognition. The event's going to take place on March 22nd. If any of you would like to attend, please connect up with me. I'm just going to take a...
I'll note while you're coming up that these are the very first Spur Impact Awards in our area. And a member of the committee who made the selections told me that this was SVCE was a standout awardee among all of the awards. So I'll note that.
Yep, we're very proud of that. So I'm going to hand over the mic to
Thank you.
Chair Abikogo now.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you to Girish for doing this, but we wanted to recognize our two past chairs of the board with a little plaque here to signify your leadership. So thank you, Director Corrigan.
Thank you.
Who's our immediate past chair, and then Director Sinks. Who was our first? Were you the first chair?
First chair.
And then Director Rennie, who's not with us today, he has one too, but we just wanted to say thank you for...
You want to hold it up?
Yes, please open it, show it to us. So everybody who wants to be, now you know what you get when you become chair, so something to look forward to. But thank you both for your leadership. This is the new club that's being started here. And thank you, Girish.
Yeah. Excuse me. I'd like to call Hillary to provide a short update on regulatory and legislative issues.
She gets all the fun.
Good evening, everybody. For those of you who are here for the first time tonight, my name is Hillary Staver, and I am the Regulatory and Legislative Manager for SVCE. I'll keep the introductions brief because there's going to be, as you know, a workshop in a couple weeks where we are going to go in depth on a variety of issues, including the major regulatory and legislative issues that we're facing now. So there will be an opportunity for everybody to get up to speed or do a refresh as you prefer. So tonight then I will speak mostly just to what's going on this month. You will, for those of you who are here for the first time tonight, you'll quickly realize that you'll hear from me in two capacities, reporting on what's going on and asking you to help us with advocacy, because our legislators would much rather hear from you than from me. So I work a lot with the Legislative Ad Hoc Committee and report out regularly at the monthly board meetings. So in terms of what's going on this month, we are kind of at a crossroads in terms of the stage of most of our major proceedings. We are wrapping up the first phase of integrated resource planning, which is a 2-year process by which the electric sector plans how it's going to get to the SB 350 target of carbon neutrality by 2045. The power charge indifference adjustment, which is the largest non-bypassable charge that our customers pay, is beginning a new phase that is expected to run through most of this year. So we have, actually, she is not here tonight, but Poonam Agarwal is leading one of CalCCA's working groups on that. So we're really getting geared up for that. Resource adequacy, the program by which we ensure that we have enough capacity on our system to meet peak demand, is currently scheduled for a vote on February 21st, but we have yet to get any new news about the proposed decision since it was delayed in January. So that is still kind of in uncharted territory, and we are looking for any signs of whether that's going to be voted on or delayed again. And finally, rate making. We are currently looking at a May 1st implementation deadline. This is kind of a new record. But as of now, the proposed decisions that will finalize the PCIA for 2019 are also on the Commission's voting agenda for the 21st. So if those don't get delayed again, we should be ready to move then through the annual electric true-up, filing, and finally implementation in May. So that is the regulatory side. Then there's also one new proceeding that we are really gearing up on, which is the order instituting investigation into PG&E's safety culture. This is distinct from the actual bankruptcy proceeding that is happening in the courts, but it's an investigation that was opened in 2015, actually, back when there was a list of safety violations already piling up. So we submitted comments today, both as part of a joint group and individual SVCE comments, commenting on some proposals that the Commission has expressed interest in getting stakeholder feedback on for reforming PG&E's corporate governance, operations, and management. So that's going to be another big one this year. You'll be hearing a lot more about that. And on the legislative side, we're nearing the February 22nd deadline for introduction of bills. So I know that a number of you have indicated interest in the Legislative Ad Hoc Committee. If legislative work is something that you're interested in, that's the place to go. We'll be scheduling a meeting of that committee in the weeks after the introduction deadline to kind of do a survey of what's come in, figure out our priorities for the session, and move forward on outreach. So those are the main points. Any questions or comments?
Yes. So what were our comments on the safety that we submitted?
The joint comments that we submitted as part of a group of Northern California CCAs focused on improved transparency in PG&E's operations.
Mm-hmm.
We suggest that they should leave the generation business, or the retail generation business altogether, and become a wires-only company. And then the comments that are, and also the joint comments focused on providing more support for communities who are interested in either forming a CCA or municipalizing, as a question of who should take over the retail generation side. Then there's also the question of what should be done in communities that are not interested in forming a CCA, and that realistically is going to need a lot more analysis and discussion. But then for our individual comments, we talked a little bit more specifically about the concept of a distribution system operator, a DSO,
Mm-hmm.
with the idea that one important piece of upgrading the grid to be more resilient and to integrate a higher percentage of distributed energy resources is to develop distribution level markets for grid services so that you could have better visibility between distributed energy resource customers, the distribution grid, and the transmission grid, which is currently run by the ISO.
So just like we have an ISO, we'd have a DSO, and operators being held responsible effectively by that umbrella.
Exactly. There's currently a gap because
Right.
we have the opportunity, aggregated distributed energy resources are allowed by FERC to participate in the California ISO's wholesale markets. So there's a visibility link there, but we don't have that kind of market on the distribution side, and that makes it harder to plan for distribution investments that can really facilitate distributed energy resources like solar, storage, transportation electrification, that kind of thing.
No, I appreciate very much that we made these comments. I think transparency continues to be a focus. For the bill that CalCCA intends to introduce, has that been done yet? Is there a bill number assigned?
There is not currently. It is
Okay.
still in the Office of Legislative Counsel in Sacramento.
Okay.
So that should be coming out very shortly.
Okay, very good. And I wonder if we just might, if the board members might not have receive via email a copy of the comments we made on these issues today.
Yes, I can send that out.
I think that would be good for us to understand and absorb and know about.
I should note too that
Well, maybe with some talking points or something. If people in our communities are interested in how we're responding to what's going on, understanding what it is we as CCAs and what we as SVC have said, I think it's important for us as board members to be on the same page, if you will.
I can definitely send that out, and I'd also point out that the opportunity for comment here was comment on a scoping ruling, which is one of the earliest filings we get in a proceeding. So there should be lots of other opportunity for comment on this. It's a big area, and hopefully the commission will be providing other opportunities for feedback throughout this year.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Just add to what Hillary has said in terms of our comments. We are also providing support in the joint parties' comments on municipalization. So those communities that want to municipalize, we ask for support of that.
Was that Cal CCA?
Well, it was the joint parties because there are a number of Southern California parties who don't really have a dog in this fight.
Got it.
So there are 7 of us who are joint parties. Additionally, Monterey filed separate comments. We filed separate comments also to emphasize the DSO issue. MCE filed separate comments. We will provide some talking points. Cal CCA is getting prepared for it. All the comments were filed today at 5 p.m.
Got it.
So
no, I get it.
Yeah, the summaries will be out tomorrow, and Cal CCA is actually prepared with some talking points to deal with press questions as early as tomorrow. They're also reaching out to legislative staff and legislative offices with a summary of our comments.
And the only other thing I'd add is, individual cities trying to take over the wires business, municipalization, in other words, sounds daunting for any one of our small cities, relatively small cities. But I think it may be interesting to talk about having a whole region, right, go and think about acquiring their wires and becoming a public agency. But I guess that wasn't covered by any of the comments.
We have talked about the whole gamut of options is what we would like the PUC to consider.
But all I'm saying is it could be more than simply individual cities, right?
Oh, yeah, so that's
municipalizing.
So publicly owned utilities, co-ops, the whole gamut is what we are suggesting that they consider.
Okay.
We tried to introduce the theme that there should be a lot of opportunity for communities to choose what type of governance structure they're interested in, with the idea that there will be further analysis of all of these through the proceeding.
Let's see. Oh, another question. Yes.
I was curious, the comments you were making, I guess there's some feeling about splitting PG&E, the electric and the gas separately. Is that something that somebody commented on at all?
Our comments focused mostly on the electricity side.
Okay. And the second question is, I don't know if you're the right person to answer or not. What is the cost for PG&E to sell electricity compared to the cost that what it costs us per unit for the same electricity? Do we have a comparison on that, or is that?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the final half of that question. Could you repeat it?
I'm just trying to figure out what our cost is, per unit, the electricity that we produce and sell, or purchase and sell, compared to what PG&E purchases and sells. What it costs PG&E to make a unit of electricity compared to what it costs us to do the same.
We charge 6% less than PG&E.
Okay.
But that's our rate. Our cost is actually even less than that, and we take a net margin that we put into our reserves that we can reinvest into the local community, into programs, and also establish reserves.
Thank you.
Question?
So we good?
Go back to.
So
Thank you.
also want to point out that Hillary's update this month has a little different format than before. And I may be biased, but I think she's done an amazing job in putting this together. It reads great. I think we had used a certain format, but over the months, it started to get very dense, and this is done in just a very conversational style, common sense style, and so that's one new format. And then the account services and community relations update, Pam decided to make a change, and it's also changed from a prose format to more of a presentation format. So I hope that you've liked that, and if you have any comments on how we are presenting the information over here, please provide us some feedback. February 23rd, as was mentioned, there is an orientation for all board members and alternates. It's going to be at the Sunnyvale Convention Community Center from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. It'll be great for you to attend all or even a part of the session. Last, just earlier this week, I was invited to speak at the Cities Association meeting tomorrow night. We'll be making a presentation on reach codes and encouraging all the attendees to add this to their work plan and also take advantage of the $10,000 grant that we will be providing if the city brings a recommendation to their city council this year. And then also give them an update on just general issues in the industry and PG&E, things like that. That's the end of my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for our CEO? If not, is there any public comment on the report? If not, we will move on. We'll accept your report. Thank you. And we'll move on to item 4, the appointment of board committee members. Should we? Oh, over there.
Okay. So we have a process that the board has put in place, and the first part of that process was to set up the exec committee, which you did. The second part, which Andrea has initiated, asked for your interest for various committees, which you have provided. We had a deadline of, maybe you can complete that.
Yeah, sure. So we sent out a matrix in mid-January, and I just realized that all of you responded to me and let me know that you were interested. So thank you so much for being responsive. And that deadline was February 1st. So based on your responses, we put together the makeup of these committees. And these committees would be the Audit Committee, the Finance and Administration Committee, and the Legislative Ad Hoc Committee. So with that, I can go ahead and summarize who expressed interest. So for the Audit Committee, that would remain with those remaining members. So that would be Director Bruins, Director Corrigan, and Director Smith. For the Finance and Administration Committee, that would be Vice Chair Miller, Director Gibbons, Alternate Director Rennie, and Director Nunez. And the Legislative Ad Hoc Committee would be Chair Abe Koga, Director Elahi, Director Nunez, Director Sayok, Director Sinks, and Director Smith.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions from board members? Yes, Director Gibbons.
I was just going to comment that we're still missing a few members tonight, but several of these committees allow between 3 and 6 members. And I would like to say that I have found it very rewarding as well as informative, because there's a lot of new stuff to be learned here, and having an opportunity to work directly with staff on learning what they're presenting and contributing to how it's being presented, and so forth. I would encourage people to join these committees. And my question, I guess, is, can people offer to join later after they get their feet on the ground? Or can we only add members at this time?
I'll defer to legal counsel on that.
There we go. No, it can be added on during the course of the year. It has to be appointed by the full board, but if someone's interested, they can express an interest. Then, as long as it's agendized at a meeting, we can make additions up to the maximum of 6 members on that particular committee.
Right, and we've set it up so that 6 is the maximum because it's not a quorum.
Yes.
And let's see, there was one other thing that we did. Oh, we also tried to divvy up the work so that no one person had position on all of them. So we wanted to make sure everybody could pitch in. Excuse me. So again, I would just encourage people, if perhaps not this evening, but going forward as you find your way, that you might want to participate in one of these committees.
And I will say, right now, there is some room on the Finance Admin Committee and the
On all
Audit
of them,
Committee.
on all of them, yep.
Ledge Action, Ledge Ad Hoc, yes, is actually full with 6, which is great, yes. But is there anybody right now who would like to add their name to either of the other 2 committees? If you're not on one yet? Yes.
Just a question, how often these committees meet and when? Is that once a month or once every other month? What's the schedule on these meetings?
For the audit committee, it's based on availability. Typically, we will meet about twice a year or as needed. For instance, this audit committee has already met, I believe, 3 times, and we're going to schedule another one in April. But they receive the audit. So it's a kickoff as well as receiving the audit. Those are the main 2 meetings, and any other time in between that we would need to meet. And the Finance and Administration Committee meets quarterly or as needed again.
I can volunteer for the Finance Committee.
Great, thank you. So we will add Director Alehi to Finance. Anybody else want to join? Okay.
If not, I would move.
Actually, let me take public comment.
Okay.
Any members of the public wishing to speak on this item? If not, okay, we'll take a motion, please.
So I will move the appointments to committees as indicated by the report with the addition of Javed to the Finance Committee.
Second.
How do I pronounce your last name, sir?
Getting ambitious now, huh?
Yeah.
Elahi.
Director Elahi to the Finance and Admin Committee.
Great, so the motion by Director Sinks, I heard Director Gibbons this time, is that right, for a second? Any other comments, discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. We will move on now to item 5, the Electric Vehicle Supply Equipment Incentive Program. And we have a presentation. Amy? Welcome.
There we go. Okay. Great. Thanks very much for the opportunity to speak. So this presentation focuses on EVSE incentives, electric vehicle supply equipment, another name for EV chargers. And I'll keep my comments brief, that way I can turn it over to you for any questions you have. So just for context, through the budget process, the board had approved 2% of operating revenues to be dedicated to programs. So that works out to be approximately $5 to $5.5 million, as shown in the gold band in the graph on the right on an annual basis. Last December, the board approved the Decarb Strategy and Programs Roadmap, and approximately $6 million for FY19 and FY20 to kick off the first tranche of programs identified in that roadmap. So this is shown in the 2 stacked bars in FY19 and FY20. And so that budget request was around, that budget request was for around 60% of the total, what we anticipate to be the total program's budget. And as we discussed back then, we'd be coming back to you with some additional budget requests. And so this is the first of such requests to fill out the program's portfolio. So SVCE has the opportunity to apply for a block grant through the California Energy Commission, a program called Cal EVIP. And it's a program that offers incentives for the purchase and installation of EV chargers. So all entities that are interested in applying for these block grants for projects starting in 2020 have to submit letters of intent this month, by early next month. And so that's part of the reason driving the timeline for this request right now. So the Cal EVIP's program goals are here. It is to implement targeted regional projects, regional incentive projects, in California that address specific regions' needs. So there's a lot of analyses underpinning existing charging infrastructure in that region, what the gap is for meeting the governor's 2025 goals that goes into the decision-making process from the CEC. It also provides a mechanism that speeds up installation, reporting, and the funding processes. There's currently around 33 million, but the anticipated future funding is around 200 million. So it's a very sizable program. And just to give you a sense of the scale, these are the 2019 projects. So there are 4 funded projects across the state. There's no project currently in the Bay Area, as you may notice. So SVCE formed a 2-county coalition to pursue Cali VIP funding. As I mentioned briefly before, the letters of intent, the LOIs, are due to the CEC this month, early next month. Funding commitments made by applicants are viewed as match funding effectively and greatly strengthen a proposal, very similar to how our SVCE match funds was very instrumental in helping us get the heat pump water heater grant. So there are also other multiple benefits, I would say, to forming this collaboration, some even beyond Cali VIP, such as regional consistency and EV charging incentives, application process reporting, coordinated outreach, technical assistance, workforce development, training. So we really expect this 2-county approach to blossom into many other collaboration opportunities beyond the specific program. And so the coalition is all of the CCAs and the 2 municipal utilities that make up the 2 counties, shown here. And for this particular area for mobility incentives, EV charger incentives, the staff proposal is to establish an EVSC incentive program of $8 million over 4 years that would address key market gaps and barriers to EV charging infrastructure deployment in our region. And as identified in the decarb roadmap adopted in December, these key market gaps and barriers are largely going to be focused on EV charging access to multi-unit dwelling, residents, low income, ride-hailing fleets, and just general fleet access as well. So this table shows a summary of leveraged funding from the coalition members. So this budget request, the SVC budget request, combined with the other coalition members' funds, totals over $30 million over the 2 counties, which would be used to kind of leverage these external funds, not just from the CEC, but there are also a number of other external funding opportunities in the pipeline, including the Volkswagen settlement, Electrify America, Phase 2 funds, which is around $200 million. That's in the process of basically being scoped. There's also a lot of funding that this would be leveraging from PG&E, Air District, et cetera. And for this particular letter of intent, we do have a support letter from the Air District to submit with our coalition's LOI. So we're working very closely with the Air District on this. Okay, so the graph at the right shows this budget request. So it's the same graph that I showed you before, but there's an addition of the blue hashed or dashed stacked bars. This $8 million request includes $7.4 million in new budget commitments, but then there's $600K in FY20 that was approved in December for DC fast charging pilots that would be brought within the umbrella of this incentive program. And so as you can see from the chart, the total program's budget is still well within the amount approved through the budget process. So as I mentioned before, we'll be coming back to you again in coming months with future funding requests. So the timeline and next steps are shown here. It is subject to change. It's largely driven by the CC timeline, but the immediate next step is to submit the letter of intent. There are a number of important steps shown here, but at the end of the day, the CEC intends to make decisions in June, so it's quite a brisk timeline by government standards. Okay. So the formal request for the board is shown here. Thanks very much for your attention, and I'd be very happy to take any questions you have.
Great, thank you. We do have some questions. Vice Chair?
Mine's pretty quick. You mentioned it, but I'm slightly confused. I agree with the whole list of priorities, multifamily, low income. You mentioned the DC fast charge program that we have. Does this change take the DC fast charge across all 4 years?
So it, I think, very likely to tackle kind of the multi-unit dwelling. Not. I mean, some incentives could be targeted specifically for installing chargers at those facilities or at those buildings. But another approach is to just make DC fast charging much more accessible.
I'm looking at where the trends in all the cars are going, right? And in the 2019, 2020 models, pretty much everybody's getting 100 kilowatt. And the infrastructure right now, state of the art's 50, unless you're a Tesla owner, I'm not. And so there is going to be a need, a distributed need on the corridors, which is different than apartment complex DC fast charge. So I'm just wondering, does our program cover that, and will it cover it for the next 4 years, or 2020 and the 4 years?
Yeah. So the short answer is yes.
Okay.
And maybe I'll provide a slightly longer answer, if that's okay. If you go to the timeline slide, or if I go to the timeline slide rather, one important component of the roadmap, which was approved, was the development of this EV charging infrastructure strategy and plan. And we actually released an RFP to bring a consultant on board to help facilitate that stakeholder process with our member agencies, the charge points of the world, the EVGos, the industry, in the development of that plan. We've timed the scope of work of that RFP, of that work to feed into this. And so, it's a very fast-moving industry, as you point out, but we think that the resulting joint action plan that results from that process, it will inform not just the incentive program that we'd be developing here, or defining the requirements here in the April-May timeframe, but we're hoping it would have a shelf life of at least 2 to 3 years. But it is something that needs to be updated given how fast the industry is moving. But certainly the goal through that process is to ensure that we're making prudent investments and taking into account what are the trends going out to at least 2025. So we do have a marker there, given we have the governor's goal of 1.5 million zero electric vehicles by then.
Great. Director Smith and then Director Sinks.
Thank you, Chair Abe-Koga. I had some questions about the coalition. Let's see, hold on. Let me pull up my questions. Can you describe how the coalition would work and how the funding would be allocated, assuming we'd get the grant?
At this stage, the letter of intent outlines the interests of the coalition members to work in good faith with the CEC and CSE to develop basically what they call a design packet. This entire grant is a little bit different from a lot of the CEC grants. It's not a competitive solicitation like an EPIC grant or many of the others. It's a block grant. And so a lot of the decision-making regarding how much consistency is everyone willing to agree to would happen in April, would happen in the March-April timeframe. There is opportunity for differentiation. And so if one service territory, let's say PCE, is very interested in supporting level 2s more, there is an opportunity to have different incentive levels across the jurisdiction. But I think certainly some of the goal is as much consistency as possible.
Okay, then, so would they be jointly filing the application, or we'll just have letters of intent, or?
So the letter of intent as drafted is a joint letter of intent with the 5, and it has not been submitted. It's we're waiting for this board meeting, as well as some other I's being dotted and T's being crossed. But the plan is to go through that process and hopefully submit this week, next week, potentially.
Okay, and so and then just finally for housekeeping, I guess, in terms of understanding the delta between what we approved in December and what this request is. So we're raising the amount to $8 million for our 2-year budget. What is the, how much are we applying for?
So one correction, the 8 million is 2 million per year between
Before.
FY
Okay,
20
got it.
and FY 23. Yeah, so I brought the
Okay,
slide up
okay.
here,
Oh.
slide 9.
Okay, yeah, I'm focused on on fiscal year 20, and I kind of ignored I'm caught up now, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so that would be, okay, all right, thanks, that's it.
Great. Director Sinks and Director Nunez and Director Corrigan.
Thank you. So different agencies are putting in different amounts. Is it accurate to say that each agency, the funds each agency puts in and gets matched, if you will go back to that service territory rather than sort of being pooled in the whole region?
That's the expectation.
Okay.
I mean, as far as the matching is concerned, it may or may not be some one-to-one match, like the Air District grant. So the Cali VIP funding, it's uncertain even what the 2020 funding levels could be.
Sure.
And because it's a block grant, we don't know how
But if
much.
we put in 8 and they return proportional, we would take a share proportional to what the block grant has for our service territory. So we take our 8 plus their, who knows, 5 for our service territory, and we would apply, we would have then 13 to spend over those 4 years, correct?
So the discussions at this point have kind of indicated that that's what the coalition would be interested in doing. But I think a lot of the details and the agreements would be worked out in April and May.
Yeah, I mean, I'm mostly interested in having money that we put into this program return to our ratepayers as opposed to ratepayers in God forbid, San Mateo County.
Yeah.
But, okay.
San
Well, I you know,
Yes.
no, I'm not going there. You said it, not me. So, let's see, the other question is, since before this agency began, I've been very interested in seeing how what branding opportunities might exist on EV chargers. Why? It's because when, I go fill up my car with electrons, I would love to, I guess it's not protons, right? We both have some background in physics, so when I fill my tank, I'd like to know, number one, that I'm, who's providing that who's sourcing that electricity, that it's SVCE, and number two, I'd love to know that it's carbon-free electricity. In the scope of this and the developing of this program, do we have an opportunity to look at any sort of branding with a wrap? I mean, we wrap buses, can we wrap chargers, or at least get our logo someplace in the user interface so that people know that, we've provided material funding to make this charger happen?
Yeah, there's definitely opportunity for that discussion, and that's something the CC is very interested in as well.
Well,
Co-branding,
I
with
would
the Cali
appreciate
VIP.
our pursuing that, because this is a substantial commitment of funding, so,
And
thank you.
Maybe I'll mention one requirement for chargers incentivized through this program is public access. And so these are
Right.
these are all public
Yeah.
access chargers. Yeah.
Right, thank you.
Thank you. So this being my first time, if my questions sound odd, they probably are. So with the new BART station, one of the things we talked to, some of the persons we talked to were the larger employers. So we've been talking to them about larger vehicles, shuttles and such that are electric. Would this accommodate partnerships with them where we would take, we're looking at the last mile, where we could take a look at electric buses and have the chargers there that would accommodate those persons that have cars there, but also just the shuttles that go back and forth to 5 or 6 or 7 different employers up and down 2 or 3 corridors.
Yeah, so this, the Cali VIP program focuses typically on level 2 and DC fast charging. And DC fast charging would be the type of charging likely that would be applicable to this type of shuttle. And so it certainly would. And I'll just point out in the program's roadmap through the stakeholder engagement process, that was a high priority for our C&I customers. They have a lot of employees coming in and out. Many of them offer different transportation benefits. They have their own bus fleets, which currently aren't electric, but there could be a lot of opportunities for electrification. So this is definitely an area of interest and would be accommodated, could be a part of this program. Yeah.
Thank you.
Amy, can I pile on? I'm curious. I see the intent and the direction this is going, but it would be remiss of me not to make a plug for two other parts of our service area that I think are worthy of some consideration. One would be specifically being from Los Altos Hills, where we only have rainbows, no rain. It sounds like it's raining pretty hard here. We have a lot of open space areas, or areas that are surrounded by fairly dense population, but certainly wouldn't qualify under the parameters you've talked about already, but would certainly be worthy of installation, in my opinion. And places that come to mind immediately are like the open space parking lots at Rancho San Antonio, for instance. So I don't want to just, I want to put in a plug for areas that service more remote and geographically removed areas that would still service a large number of people. And then secondly, I've mentioned this before, but I really don't want to miss the opportunity to do it again. Our library system has a lot of crossover between the JPA here and the JPA for the libraries, and I think they're an absolute logical partner. Although I admit some already have charging stations in the library parking lots, others do not, and I know the library would be a partnership that would be ripe to discuss this with.
The most successful DC fast charging of the West Valley cities is in the Saratoga Library parking lot. You definitely got to do that.
Great. Director Elahi.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation, and I really appreciate the comments. I think it adds a lot to what may help in moving this forward. I was just curious on how you choose a co-partner, I guess, San Mateo County compared to other counties like Monterey or Alameda. Is any of our production, does that come from any other county, or where you source your energy from? Is that part of what the influence is, or is it coming from Monterey County, for example? So that was one of the things I wanted to know. And also, besides choosing them, why did you think that a co-application would be better than just submitting an application on our own? If you could comment on that, please.
Sure. So for the first one, how we kind of picked the partners. So for Cal EVIP, you have to have a whole county on board. And so if we wanted to participate, we had to have San Jose, Palo Alto, Santa Clara. But for San Mateo, there's a lot of mixing between the two, and we had been meeting fairly regularly to identify different collaboration opportunities. Our customer base, there are a lot of similarities, and there's a lot of traffic along kind of the Peninsula corridor, and so it seemed to make sense for an EV charging infrastructure project to certainly form that regional coalition. But then also it actually dovetails collaboration we had already started for the REACH code effort. And a component to that effort is, one component is building electrification, but then there's a second track on EV codes. And so we've already been collaborating with them on EV code development through that REACH code effort. And so this was a very nice kind of extension to that. And then the second question, so that's how we chose them. Monterey actually already has a project that's going to be launched very soon. So Monterey Bay, and I believe a couple other counties down there. So they were part of their own application. And just, a large part of it also just depends on kind of what stage the different CCAs are in and their launch and enrollment and programs development. And so PCE and SVCE we were both ready. So, and then I'm sorry, I forgot the second question.
The second part was why even do a co-application? Why don't we just submit our own?
The idea is certainly for them. They want to fund larger regional partnerships, and so they told us in so many words, "Go big or go home."
Okay.
So
that makes sense. Thank you.
Any other questions from board members? If not, is there any public comment on this item? No. If not, we'll bring it back to the board, and so we need to approve the program. Yes. All right.
So I move the adoption of Resolution 2019-02 to approve the budget request for the Electric Vehicle Supply Equipment Incentive Program, totaling $8 million for a 4-year period, FY 2020 to 23.
I'll second that.
Right, there's a motion from Member Bruin, second by Member Corrigan. Any other discussion? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, abstentions, motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Amy. And we will move on to item 6, the 2020 time of use rate transition for residential customers. We have a presentation from Mr. Don Bray, our Director of Account Services and Community Relations. Wow, was that the word? Welcome, Don.
Been having hurricanes here in Cupertino. I don't know.
All right. Thank you, Chair, and good evening, directors. Over the next... Was it something I said?
Karen.
If you're laughing at the end of this, I'm going to be very, very happy. But, so over the next 24 months, all residential customers in California that are currently on tiered rate plans are going to be transitioned to a time of use rate. And this is being driven by the California Public Utilities Commission, and it stands to affect over 200,000 of our customers, so a majority of our customers in the service territory. So it's going to be a big deal for us beginning later this year and through next year. This, by the way, is the first time we've brought this to the board. It's just a discussion tonight to really introduce you to it. For our new board members, you've arrived at the perfect time. So we'll dive in. I'm going to take a few minutes to provide an overview of the history and background of time of use rates, including a recent pilot that was conducted in our service territory. I'll talk about the timeline for full-scale rollout, and I'll talk about some key considerations that we need to keep in mind around rate setting next year, the notion of bill protection, what we need to do associated with marketing and outreach, what this means for solar customers. There have been particular questions around that I'd like to address, and then I'll open it up for questions. So historically, electricity customers have been charged based on how much they use in a month, and it's been a pretty simple process. There was an analog meter, and a meter reader came once a month and saw how much you used, and the bill showed up. But then in the late 90s, early 2000 timeframe, we started seeing the emergence of smart meters. There's a major program in California, and particularly in PG&E territory, to deploy smart meters, which opened up a lot of new possibilities around how customers could be charged. Now you could look at not just how much is used, but when electricity is used, or what perhaps the peak usage in a given period is, and basing rates around these additional parameters. All business customers now, or most all business customers, are charged on time of use rates, but that hasn't been implemented yet in most residential rates. There are some, it's about 7% of residential rates are time of use. Some of you might be familiar with these associated with EV or solar, but the majority are still based on tiered usage. So I'm going to keep going here. So over the past 3 or 4 years, there's been a big push by the CPUC to establish a program for doing a statewide transition. That the notion here is that a time of use rate offers the ability to give customers a discount when demand on the system is lower, or give them a discount when there's more supply on the system, as is the case now during the sunniest parts of the day. So in the end, it can really help promote adoption of renewable energy on the grid. And then importantly, it also removes the penalty for using more electricity. So a tiered rate usually means just that. The more you use, the more you pay. Well, if we're trying to move customers to electric vehicles or to a heat pump water heater, that means you're using more electricity, and we don't want to penalize customers for that. So time of use is going to be good from the perspective of encouraging strategic electrification. Most of you, I think, are familiar with the duck curve. Energy on the wholesale market can be twice as expensive, typically, between, say, 5 and 9 in the evening as it is during the rest of the day, and yet that isn't reflected in rates that our residential customers pay currently. And as you know, that energy demand also results in firing of peaker plants during those evening hours, which isn't good for the environment. So most of our residential customers are on a tiered rate that looks like what you see on this chart. For the first 300 kilowatt hours or so that you use in a month, a customer would pay on the order of 20 cents, and that moves to roughly 30 cents for the next 900 or so kilowatt hours, and then after that moves to a much higher rate of about 45 cents. So this is the rate that most of our customers are currently on, and you can see that it doesn't reward more usage. In fact, the real design of it was to encourage efficiency. The idea being the less you use, the less you pay. So we are really looking at a kind of a change in paradigm here as we move from this old system to time of use. So the proposed new default time of use rate looks like what you see on this chart. What's been set up is a rate that is the same every single day. Between the hours of 4 and 9 p.m., there will be a peak rate, and all other hours, there's an off-peak rate. So it's really very simple. You just want to use less between 4 and 9, and it doesn't matter what day of the week it is. The rates do vary a little bit between summer and winter, but it's the same general model each and every day. In terms of the timeline, the plan is to roll this out in 10 regional waves, beginning in October of next year, October 2020. So this is across all PG&E territory. They've created a map and started to map out when transitions will happen. There will be some changes to commercial rates as well, which are going to push the peak periods later in the day, but we'll deal with that separately. It's on a separate timeline, and since customers are already on TOU, it's really more about changes in the rate itself as opposed to the rate structure. So I realize this is a very detailed chart, but the short story here is that we are in wave 1. So we're leading off, and so Silicon Valley Clean Energy and San Jose Clean Energy and any PG&E customer in Santa Clara County will all be transitioned under this plan in October of 2020. The timing is good. It's somewhat optimal to do this in a shoulder season when it's not too hot or not too cold. The utility bill doesn't tend to be that high in a shoulder season like this. It can be higher in the middle of the winter, or it can be higher in the middle of the summer. So I think we were fortunate to get this date. To some extent, we lobbied for it, but this is the current plan. I think we'll also get some additional attention, being the first ones to move. There is a statewide marketing campaign that's beginning. I don't know if anyone has seen these ads on TV yet. If you haven't, you will. But it's under the brand or under the rubric of Keeping California Golden. And it's really a very general set of advertising around how this move will allow more renewables on the grid. So it speaks to sunshine being your friend during the middle of the day and wind being your friend at night, and very general messages like that. So that's how the advertising campaign is beginning. The campaigns are being done statewide. Again, this is not just PG&E, but it's the other two IOUs in California as well that are all going to be doing this. So the good news for us is that we have piloted this already. We had about 7,500, I guess initially, customers in the Milpitas area that were part of the what was called TOU pilot. It actually coincided more or less perfectly with when we brought the Milpitas customers on in June. There were pilot customers in 2 other CCAs, Marin and Sonoma. So our 3 were essentially piloting this for the CCA community. We worked really closely with PG&E on the messaging for this. I'll describe in a minute the messaging that the customers get, but it was co-branded, and we worked on the exact nature of the messaging with PG&E as we went. In terms of preliminary results, it was interesting. Of the customers that were noticed, it's an opt-out type of program, so you're automatically opted into the new time of use rate, but you have the option to go back to the tiered rate or to go to a different time of use rate. And about 70% of the customers in Milpitas that were opted into this elected to stay with it, and about 15% chose other time of use rates, and about 15% either for whatever reason didn't qualify after the end of the notice period. A lot of times it's because they moved out. It's the typical reason. Or some number, about between 5 and 10% elected just to stay with an E1 rate. This profile was really similar across MCE and SCP. So this is just generally how these programs seem to be working. A lot of similarity region to region. In terms of SVCE considerations, we need to be thinking about the fact that our customers will fall into one of 3 general buckets. We'll have some customers that are natural winners with the move to a time of use rate. We'll have some that are natural losers. Then we'll have some where it really is somewhat indifferent. So if you look at the examples on here, customer 1, that column, the current rate plan would cost the customer $1,921 a year. On a time of use rate, they'd actually pay more. So they're out $70-75 over the course of a year as a result of the migration. Same for customer 2 and customer 3, except customer 2 wins by about that amount, and then customer 3 is winds up even Steven. In terms of marketing, education, and outreach, there are 4 notices that go out to these customers beginning about 4 months in advance. And one of those notices actually gives the customer a customized assessment of how they'll do under time of use based on their usage over the past year. And then the customer can see whether they're likely to be a winner or a loser if they don't change their habits at all. They can also see how they might benefit by going to a different time of use rate plan, say other than the default time of use rate. The CEC requires that that PG&E, and we did the same thing for our Milpitas pilot customers, that we offer bill protection during the first year of this program. So if a customer for whatever reason, doesn't come out even, if they're a loser, then we pay that difference after 12 months. And then moving forward from there, the customer's on their own. And this has been done in other time of use transitions around the country with other utilities. It's a fairly standard practice, but it does help ease customers into the transition, but it's something we need to be thinking about as we go. So in terms of next steps, we're going to come back to the board in the summer, probably be the August meeting, looking for an official go on this. We could, if we wanted, decide to not do this. I don't think that would be the best idea. There are a lot of good reasons for doing it. So we may elect to do it, but we'll also have choices about how we do it. For instance, we could think about doing our rate a little differently. We could adjust our rates so that we don't wind up paying extra for customers that we have to bill protect if we offer bill protection. So there's going to be a few dials that we'll want to evaluate and make decisions around beginning this summer, and then probably the beginning of next year when we set rates that will be effective for when the transition happens. So that's it for the overview presentation. I'll take questions at this point.
Great, thank you. And so this is discussion this evening, and then this will come back to us in the summer. Okay. So questions, Vice Chair?
Sure. My questions are all around the required nature of this. So if we choose to do it, our customers don't have that option to stay on the E1 or go back to the E1. They're going to be on a time of use. The question is just which plan, right?
No, they will have, well, they would have the option, our pilot customers had the option to go back to an E1 if they want to.
Okay, so everybody in the state is still going to have the option to stay E1 if they want.
Correct. And that E1 rate is scheduled to be active into the foreseeable future.
So they would be E1 tiered rate?
They'd be exactly what they are today. E1
well,
tiered
they would
rate.
adjust the rates every year. And
yeah. Right,
okay.
Right.
Then the related question, and maybe you sort of in a way answered it, we don't have to do this at all if we don't want to.
No.
So what did the CPUC actually decide? Did they decide we just have to make it available? They decided we can optionally do it? It seems weird because if they're really trying to solve the program, it seems like it sort of has to be mandated.
Well, it was mandated to the IOUs. So the IOUs are doing it. But I think we fall into that zone now of, you know, if the IOU wants to do it, but if the bulk of the rate impact of this is on the generation side, we're still able to make that decision ourselves.
Okay. So it is possible that the whole state may choose not to do this.
Well, the IOU customers are still going to be subject to this.
So anybody who stays on PG&E, they don't have the choice.
They would be, well, they can go back to E1 if they want, right?
Okay.
Yeah, so it's, what the program does is it essentially transitions people to the time of use rate unless they want to opt back or opt to a different rate. It's sort of like how we got.
Okay, and then riddle me this for the solar customers, right? They were all sold solar based on time of use and tiered rates.
So the plot thickens here.
Yes.
So we have about 19,000 solar customers now, big number. Interestingly, about 7,000 of those are on an E1 tiered rate.
Right.
And especially solar customers going back to the earlier days of solar, a lot of them were on a tiered rate, and they still are. Those customers will be transitioned. They'll have the option to go back to the tiered rate if they want, or go to a different time of use rate if they want, but they will be transitioned, and they'll be transitioned in the month of their true-up. So, yeah, it'll be October true-up customers, NEM customers that go next October, and then just similar to how we did NEM enrollments, we did it quarterly. PG&E is doing it monthly.
So for us, once we turn it on, then everybody that solar will happen within the year. What happens with the solar customers that are already, or EV customers that are already on a time of use?
They stay exactly where they are.
They are untouched.
Yeah, they are untouched.
Of course, they would have the option to go to this one if
They
they
could,
wanted.
yeah. And so if, in fact, the rate is active now, this default time of use rate, affectionately known as TOUC. I don't know how they came up with that name, but so you can go out there now and you can see how you would do on TOUC versus the other rates. You can go to PG&E's site and it'll do that analysis for you. And you could elect to go to TOUC today if you wanted to.
So the arbitrage that solar customers are doing right now, where the highest rate is in the middle of the day, they're on a time of use rate. The highest rates are in the middle of the day, so they get the maximum amount of credit back, well, between us and PG&E.
Mm-hmm.
That will still all be in effect and still work.
That will still work. That rate, it's called the E6 rate that
Right.
a lot of customers, solar customers are on. That's very beneficial for solar customers currently. Separately of any of this, there is another plan that is going to start to migrate the peak period for the E6 rate until later in the day. And then the E6 sunsets, I believe, at the end of 2023.
Okay, so they're on a path to get out of this
They're on
too.
a separate path, right. that
So
isn't
we should do a
connected to this.
program so that those guys can get battery storage. Because a lot of them bought solar from somebody who gave them a 20-year projection or a 30-year projection over the life of their system. And if we move the time of use on them, and again, that's not this program, but when we move the time of use, because it's the right thing to do for the grid, those guys are going to be left holding the bag. And the only way for them to sort of halfway recover is to let them shift as we move the rates, which means they've got to put in battery at their house. But, okay, thank you for those answers, and hopefully you accepted those comments someplace in the back of your brain. When we deal with solar, we're going to have to do something.
Director Smith and then Director Givens.
Yeah, so to follow on Director Miller's comments about adding solar for battery storage, or the battery storage for the solar customers, would that kind of a program be part of our bill protection, or would we accommodate that in our plan? Or is the bill protection kind of a canned thing, or can we customize it to accommodate these solar users?
So bill protection at the end of the day isn't going to involve, or shouldn't involve, a whole lot of money. I think the expectation is that the average amount of bill protection a customer would need, the number I've heard is on average, again, across all deployed customers, is about $12 for that year. So we had, at the end, I think we had maybe 5,000 customers times 12. So our exposure for the Milpitas time of use enrollment was about 60K, not much. If we are going to offer a battery program or help support a battery program in some way, that would obviously be a much larger investment. It doesn't mean we couldn't look at it, but it would be a much bigger deal.
Thank you. So I believe your presentation indicated this, that each customer will get a customized statement showing what their options are and what the potential cost differential is. So it's the classic, if you read your mail, you'll have the information that you need. So that was one of the things that we spoke of at the committee meeting, subcommittee meeting. I thought was a very good component of this program. So it pretty much puts it out there. So.
Yeah, it's again, it's based on your previous year of usage. That's the data they use, but it's about as good of a projection or data set as you could give a customer.
Yes, Director Sayok.
Thanks. I'm just curious about the statewide marketing campaign that has already occurred, and how specific is it? And so I'm thinking of just a regular residential user. Majority of them, 4 to 9 is when their peak hours of usages, because that's when they're home. So are there specific tips to allow the average user to think through how they can shift their energy usage to different times? Or is it just, hey, this is happening, beware?
So I'll answer that in two ways. One, I believe the advertising campaign is still quite general, and that the intent is that it will become more specific as we get closer to the time when the transitions are happening. There was in the lead up to the pilot enrollments that were done last year, there was education on things you could do. So there was, do your wash in the evening, or set your dishwasher to run overnight, or there were a number of specific pieces of advice that were given to customers around this as part of that education process before the enrollment.
So are those things that we would do for our own customers then?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And PG&E is paying for a lot of this. I mean, it was all built into the transition. So a lot of the marketing activity is funded already, and it included these elements of education. Of course, we can add to that however we'd like. A lot of that work was co-branded in the case of the Milpitas pilot, so had our logo on there, it had PG&E's logo on there, but it was the same information going out at other CCAs as well.
Okay, I have Director Nunes and then Director Gibbons.
If you did all of this just to say Milpitas this many times just because I came, thank you.
Yes. Welcome back.
I noticed you keep saying about the residents. So does this not include small businesses and the larger corporations?
So small businesses and larger corporations are already on time of use rates.
Okay.
And those transitions have happened over the last 10 years or so in different waves, but they're already on TOU rates.
Okay.
I did mention that there will be some adjustment later in the day of the peak periods for those rates. So there's going to be some outreach and engagement that we're going to have to do collectively with PG&E to the commercial community around the fact that their rates are going to be shifting a little bit, but the structure of them isn't changing in the same way that it is for residential customers.
And shifting means what?
So today, the peak period for a big commercial rate would be between 12 and 6 p.m. So that's when you're paying your highest utility rate or generation rate. It's going to shift so it's more like between 4 and 9 in the evening. So that's going to benefit some businesses. It's going to hurt other businesses. Think of a restaurant. It's going to be tough on a restaurant. It might be good for a traditional company with, say, an office type environment.
Thank you.
Director Gibbons?
I think there is a huge education and mental shift. One of the things we may end up pointing out as I'm going to call it a cheat sheet, and we might want to encourage developers to do this, is buying appliances like washers and dryers that have timers on them or are smart. We want to encourage the use of smart environmental controls so that you can cool your home or apartment down to 60 degrees during the day for pennies, and then it just builds up and gets used while you're actually in the home. So there's a lot of things like that will be generated by all of these different programs, but it is a whole new mindset.
Yes. Director Seale.
I'm just wondering, a lot of the smart technology, though, is expensive. And so if we're looking at lower income families that can't necessarily make these changes, do we have any subsidies to allow families that are interested to shift their own technology, whether it's appliances or smart meters or anything that would be helpful that also costs money?
So, I mean, it's certainly something we can look at. There is the CARE and FERA programs out there today that offer sizable discounts to low-income customers. But yeah, we should be looking at that as we go.
Great. Any other questions, comments? If not, is there any member of the public wishing to speak on this item? No? All right, then we will revisit this in a couple of months, and at that point, it sounds like we have some decisions to make, correct? So, great. Thank you. All right. Moving on, now we have our committee reports. So we'll start with item 7 is executive committee report. I have that. We met on January 29th and discussed the 2020 time of use rate transition, code of ethics policy, which was on the consent tonight, and future stakeholder and community input processes. The chair and vice chair of the executive committee were selected, myself as chair, Vice Chair Miller as vice chair of the committee, and the group selected a regular meeting schedule of every fourth Friday of the month from 9:30 to 11:30 a.m. The group also discussed moving power contracts executed by the CEO to the end of the board packets, as referenced in tonight's packet. It was Appendix A. And staff has requested to cancel the regularly scheduled February 22nd executive committee meeting due to a light agenda, and if acceptable with the board, the next regularly scheduled executive committee meeting will be held Friday, March 22nd. Do we need to take a vote on that, or is that okay? Great. And that concludes my report. We'll move on to the Finance and Admin Committee, and that's Vice Chair Miller.
Yeah, so our chair termed out in Montecito, left us holding the bag. So we met on January 25th without Burton, and we received a presentation from a larger than River City bank that I'll leave as unnamed, just because I don't want to plug them. We gave feedback to staff under what conditions we might want to talk to another bank, just to avoid having to get a presentation from every possible bank that wants to service us now that we're a $300 million organization. You can imagine they all want our business. And they're probably going to become needs and uses by which we would want a larger bank with more services and a larger set of offerings than just River City. But this might not be the week. Staff will probably continue to receive these sorts of presentations, but hopefully fewer at the Finance Committee. It was a long presentation and it might not have been as relevant as we wanted. The staff presented recommendations to expand our current line of credit with River City, which we've already approved this evening, and we got a year-end financial condition, sort of an update as to how we're being squeezed by various factors that are outside of our control. And our next meeting was not scheduled because we're waiting to see who the members are going to be and come up with an appropriate meeting time.
Thank you. And I forgot to ask if there were any questions on the two reports, any public comment on item 7 or 8? No? All right, we'll move on to the Legislative Ad Hoc Committee, which is me, and we have nothing to report as we have not met yet, but I think we'll be meeting soon. And then item 10, Director Corrigan with the Audit Committee.
So as you heard earlier, the Audit Committee met several times this winter. We started our work on February the 4th and received an update of the financial audit by the auditor you met tonight, Brett, who represented his firm. We also had a chance to talk to him privately as the Audit Committee without management in the room. And I felt like the process was incredibly thorough and that my fellow Audit Committee members asked incredibly well thought out questions, and that we did a terrific job as a committee and worked well together with outside and staff. We also, in addition to the financial audit, had an in-depth presentation about the security audit or the annual IT audit and ongoing automated meter infrastructure or AMI audit. The AMI audit is required by the CPUC and is focused on the security of customer information and data. So the committee also approved a request for information on cybersecurity. In fact, it was so incredible that it made me think, I wish I could do this at my own home. But the audit committee's next meeting is tentatively scheduled for April 29th, and we will at that point expect to receive additional updates on the IT audit.
Great. Any questions for Director Corrigan? Any members of the public wishing to speak? If not, we will move to board member announcements and direction on future agenda items. Anything from board members? Yes.
I'd like to just give a shout out and a brief introduction to my new alternate this year. It's George Tyson, who's waving in the room right now. George is a brand new city council member in the city of Los Altos Hills. I'm proud to work with him. And I, after some discussion with Steve, we agreed that it would make good sense, since I do term out in 2020, to have another council member come on as my alternate for this year, and possibly us reverse roles next year, so that he'll be the primary member and I would be the alternate, so that the transition is smooth for the city of Los Altos Hills and SVCE.
Great.
Thank you, George, for being here tonight.
Yes. Welcome, George. And I remember you from a past life on the Cupertino, was it, school board? Yeah. So welcome to SVCE. Any other board members? Yes, Director Gibbons.
Thank you. The American Institute of Architects Santa Clara Valley chapter is holding their second unique program called Architectural Intelligence. It's March 1st, and it happens to be a busy day for many of us, but it is a wonderful program that staff went to last time a year ago, and it is focusing on sustainability and energy conservation. There's a lot of awareness, and it's sustainability and equity plus leadership in the Silicon Valley.
Well,
and they have some well-known speakers, and I would encourage you to check it out.
Whereabouts is it? And is it open to the public?
It's open to the public,
Okay.
and it's at the Convention Center, downtown San Jose.
Time?
It's all day. I think it starts at 9 to 3.
American?
I can give the
Could you-
information to
yeah.
Andrea, and she can send it out for anyone
Yeah.
who'd like to go.
Great.
It's going to be fun.
Great. Any other members? No? All right, then. We will have a closed session. So at this time, we will take public comment on the closed session. If there is any member of the public wishing to speak? No? If not, could we do we need to announce the closed session?
At this point, all we need to announce is we are going to close session to discuss existing litigation that involves the PG&E bankruptcy.
Great.
Move to adjourn to closed session.
Second. Yes, we do.
Yes,
We'll
we
need to come out
will,
after the closed
report out.
session and adjourn at that time.
So we'll move into the closet, the kitchen, or whatever. Thank you, everyone. 9 p.m. Thank you, everyone, and have a good Valentine's Day tomorrow. Most of us will be at 6.
Yes, it is associated.